Well, it is now obvious that our Constitution has finally failed. Our Constitution was created and designed to stop both criminals and bureaucrats from infringing on what we are doing. Now, the scale of government intrusion in our lives and the rapid deconstruction of individual rights is the new business of government. Government has now totally redefined its own meaning and purpose as it tries to make itself into God. Our Constitution has failed, or perhaps it can be better said that we have failed our Constitution, because there are many principles embedded in our Constitution that could solve many current problems. But those principles are ignored, or they are nearly forgotten, and government has become a vast millstone on the neck of every living person, a monster that protects and promotes and enriches itself only at the expense of the people who created it, and in defiance of nearly every word written in our Constitution. The servant has become the master, and we can all feel that every day when we are told to shut our businesses, wear masks, pay taxes, and make application to be allowed to run a business, drive a car, own property, or perform hundreds of other harmless and rightful activities over which the government should have no concern. Any central authority that is allowed to control something will eventually control everything. Central authority uses its central authority to collect more central authority. Nothing can stop that, except for the initial prevention of central authority from existing at all. That is what our Constitution tried to do. That is what our next Constitution must do much better. And we all need to start to envision that Constitution right now, if not yesterday. In violation of our Constitution, our police are now permitted to arrest and penalize us for harmless behavior, which are called offenses, when such offenses under our Constitution are not crimes and are not punishable. For our next Constitution to have any chance of lasting longer than our last one, it must clearly prohibit the slaps in the face of humanity, such as taxing or licensing us for driving, for owning property, for running a business, engaging in commerce, keeping what we earn, and all the other impositions on our harmless and necessary activities. To allow a central authority to fabricate offenses, collect fines in unjust enrichment of itself, imprison people who have no victims, commit force without full accountability, is to have a central authority which will over time become a tyranny by natural and inevitable processes, as has clearly taken place in the USA and most of the rest of the world. We need this new Constitution to empower people over government instead of the reverse. We need this new Constitution to guarantee that those who work in government will fear and obey the public as we now fear and obey government. We the people is not a magical phrase. People in government are not worried what one or two people want or think. They are worried that someday a lot of people will find government to be obsolete, irrelevant, broken, and in need of replacement or elimination. That is what was happening when the phrase, "we the people," was first applied to public policy. Unless there are a lot of people moving in the same direction, then we the people doesn't mean much. When we claim our power, we must show our numbers if we wish to exercise authority over the public servant. By simply not doing that, we are inviting government to violate our neighbors and ourselves. Our public servants love to provoke us and divide us so that we have little power. And they're right. We will have no power until we put aside our differences and join each other in seeking power, freedom, justice against the real public enemy, which is the tyrant, the bureaucrat, the officer, the code, the statute, or law that purports to seize our wealth and control our rightful behavior. Of course, this small privilege we seek, to simply be left alone, is only earned and gained by those who are responsible, ethical, fair, and reasonable. It does not work for the criminal. But in our current system, everyone is treated as a criminal and suspect. No one is granted privilege of self-determination. Responsible and ethical people are subject to the same institutional oppression, control, taxation, and regulation as any criminal at large. one-size-fits-all government, defaulting to tyranny, where a terrorist might blow up an airplane and then your grandmother is suspected of being a terrorist. Idiocy, abuse, and injustice because it is expedient. And it seems logical to a sub-average IQ security guard somewhere in our great city who has been given the privilege to violate your liberty and safety under his personal judgment. We need this new Constitution to give the people, individually, the power of termination and prosecution of any public servant that displeases the public. We need to assert our clear superiority, not just over the public servant who breaks the rules, which most of them do, not just over the public servant who forgets his oath to the Constitution, as most of them do, but we must have the power to terminate the employment of any public servant we wish at any time for any reason or for no reason. Without that, our public servants are controlling us, when obviously it should be the other way around. This may seem very odd and unfamiliar, but we must keep in mind that we have all been indoctrinated by government-run schools and government-controlled media to worship and fear the government as our master. All of our lives, we have been bombarded daily with lies, propaganda, and messages which serve the agendas of power and suppress the rights of the individual. We are brainwashed to think we are inferior to government. We created government. We pay for government. We are not inferior to government in any way, except if they tell us we are inferior and we believe that. And they work very hard to get us to believe that from when we are 2 years old. Waking up is not easy, but the time for that has come. Only when we rediscover the fact that we are the creators and masters of our government can we expect government to serve us and respect us as the source of their authority. If you think government derives its authority from anything or anyone but you, you are joining the cult and singing the chant. It may seem like, if we deem to command government, that we are being arrogant. But the alternative is to live in fear of an arrogant government, which has no respect for our status as their creator. For justice and freedom to exist at all in society, we must create and define a very different relationship between ourselves and our public servants than presently exists. It must be government who is punished by us when they offend us. We must live up to our personal responsibilities by continually removing from government those who are poor in service to us, until government will once again become a proper service provider and stop being a domineering tyrant. We must demand that no one in government receive higher pay or greater benefits or power than anyone else in society for equal work and service. We must demand that public servants address us as their employer in a style and manner that they never forget that fact, as they have now done. It cannot be said that we have public servants if they do not act like public servants. These are the types of things our new Constitution must provide, and we must enforce on a daily basis. Our last Constitution was developed, argued, written, and ratified by about 55 of the most ambitious and intelligent people in the New World colonies. Those people are now called privileged white male slave owners, in a blind insult to the brilliance of what they did, what they accomplished, and the greatness of the nation they created. What they did made it possible for some Americans to not be slaves and to abolish slavery altogether later on. It was the best they could do at the time, and it was better than the world has ever seen before or since. But we look at the bombastic behavior of our government today and see what they do to us. We can see that once again we are slaves, and we must once again rise to the challenge. In the future, everyone must sign the new Constitution. Every single person alive, and those that are born later must sign the new Constitution as well. But with so many signatures necessary to ratify a valid Constitution, we can never all agree on the wording of a single Constitution, so we must each sign our own Constitution, one that is to our liking, each of us a different constitution perhaps, for every man and woman, and those shall be the contracts with which we shall interact with government we thereby create. We will say what government may and may not do to us. We will say what government must do to serve us. We will say what government may be and may not become. We will say what we will do in response to the government employee who fails to comply with our constitutions, and we will execute those policies regularly so government will remain in its place ongoing and hopefully forever. There are many ways our constitutions might improve the performance and cost of government. For instance, the only funding or revenues that government will collect is that which will be voluntarily provided in return for services requested. We will pay after services are provided, and we will have full access to all accounts to verify the efficiency and economy of those services, and we will bring consequences to those who do not perform satisfactorily. Government will have no privilege or charter to force us into compliance or service to it. There will be no filling out of applications, no standing in line, no begging or waiting for decisions from our servants. We make the decisions on our schedule, and our public servants will perform accordingly. Our constitutions need to have those kinds of things in clear language, and we will revise our new constitutions as we see fit at any time we see fit. Anyone in government who wishes to interact with us must request our personal constitutions, must abide by them, and must be punished, fined, and defamed if they fail to do so. If any of this seems radical, you have been brainwashed to imagine government to be something more than it is. You have been conditioned to worship and fear your public servants, and you must stop that for your own sake and the sake of everyone else in society who is abused, harassed, exploited, and oppressed by government. Either we own and control the world we live in, or public servants take control of the world we live in and become tyrants lording over us. We have to make that choice. We have to take a stand. We have to have courage and take action, or we are slaves and servants ourselves. We have seen how our government continually fabricates, exceeds, and grows its own power. We can see that there is no limit to that. We can see that is unsustainable and already badly out of control. We need to write our own constitutions. We need to express what we expect and demand our government to do and be. We need to present those constitutions to them on a regular basis, and we must revoke anything we signed under duress and refer them to our constitutions. If Benjamin Franklin can sign a constitution, so can you. If John Hancock or Thomas Jefferson can do that, so can you. They had their constitution, you must have yours, because theirs is no longer working. Sadly, they are no longer here to defend their constitution, but you are here, and you can defend theirs or yours. A constitution is nothing more than a contract. Even simpler, a declaration of terms. Any contract you write is your constitution. Any contract someone else writes is their constitution. Never sign someone else's constitutional declarations. Write and sign your own. Serve them upon anyone who needs to understand what rights, freedoms, and terms you require. You are the final and the only authority on who enters contract with you, who interacts with you, and on what terms they interact with you. Look for the things in your life where you are losing your wealth, your property, rights, and freedoms, and write contracts to correct those problems. That is your constitution. Present those contracts as your Declaration of Independence. You can write contracts that offer any terms with any contract, and you can present such contracts anytime you wish to anyone you wish. And you can tell those who refuse to honor your terms that they have no privilege of contract over you. Civic responsibility is done by contract, and that contract must be voluntary. Any contract gained by force or coercion is a null and void contract. Citizenship is a contract. an expression of servitude. I suggest that you not use the word citizen in your contract. Our founding fathers knew this. They did not start our Constitution with the phrase, "we the citizens." It was "we the people." People have no particular status. What gives them status are their contracts and their belief in their own sovereignty and their courage to defend that sovereignty, and frankly, how many of them can show up for the revolution. If it is only you and I, it won't work. We have to spread the word so the voice can be heard. Unless our neighbors and our friends join us, we will fail and we will be attacked by those tyrants for daring to imagine a better world. Whatever you give up in any contract, you must get something in return, and you must put that in your contract. Simply agreeing to do what people tell you to do is slavery. There must be a negotiation. There must be equal benefit for all parties, and the whole thing must be fully disclosed and fully voluntary. These are the things that make a contract valid. If you can't write a contract, learn how, or get someone to help you. 90% of all power is simply declared power. And without the declaration, the power does not exist. So whatever you want, you must say it. You can make it real later if necessary, but first, say it. There's no one out there handing out power. The only power you have is that which you declare, and even then you might have to fight to win that power. But unless you are making your own declarations, you are merely a servant, or at best a non-participant in society. No one owes you anything until you negotiate that in a fair contract. And you do not owe anyone else anything unless you negotiate that in a fair contract. If someone simply shows up and says you owe a tax, there is no contract. You owe nothing. Our founding fathers wrote this in their contract, but that contract is no longer being honored. So now we must do it again. As our globalist elites have told us, it is time for a reset. Will it be their reset or your reset? Declare your independence. Write your Constitution and do everything you can to live under the principles in your Constitution. Find and associate with people who write their own constitutions. Cherish those relationships. Join them in groups when you deal with your public servants. Be resistant to all the manipulations, messages, and tricks which turn you back into a servant. Demonstrate your authority and your courage.